Hello and welcome to the Sias to Plessis show. Thank you to everyone that has liked and subscribed. Remember, you can catch us on Spotify and iTunes, as well as right here on YouTube. Thank you for your support, and thank you to our proud partners at Betway for supporting the show. Check out the Betway Premiership for the latest football action. Betway scores on the App Store too, so you don't miss anything. Now, it is a great pleasure and an honor to welcome a man who is doing incredible things. He has a phenomenal story to tell, and at the end of the day, he is someone who is changing lives through his amazing work. And this show has always been about speaking to inspirational people. Danny Costa, thank you for making time. Thank you for spending time telling your story and inspiring people, because you're doing amazing work. How are things going, and how long are you in South Africa for?
Thanks. Yes, lovely to be here. It's been quite a journey to get to this point. Currently in South Africa on a 6-week journey. The mission is to get to 32 schools. The overall mission of Mission 32, the overall aim is to inspire, educate, and equip 20,000 adolescents in 3 countries to start off. So South Africa, the UK, and Portugal. So that's what brings me back home. Last week, I had the honor of going back to my old school and presenting to them as the first one. So that was a really, really special experience. And now I've got 5 weeks ahead of me and really looking forward to it.
I unfortunately missed your talk at the Betway 12th Man program. And big shout out to Seth Pearson and the Forward Zone team, Ash Kotson, for doing amazing things, empowering former athletes with some drive, I suppose, giving them some brand training, some basic skills, and I suppose education in a way, and how to take on the next chapter. But you had grown men in tears, Danny, during that talk. Can you maybe just share what the crux is of that talk? What sort of the sort of messages that comes out of it? Because we'll get to your story, and it is phenomenal. But what is the sort of thing about that mindset change, or the mental toughness, or maybe just share that without giving away too much of that talk? Because I'm so bummed I missed it, and I'm hoping to catch up a little bit today.
No, absolutely. I had the opportunity to go present at the Betway 12th Man program, which is absolutely phenomenal. The challenge that most athletes, whether it's whatever country you are, is what do they do after their sporting careers? So when I had the opportunity to go share my story, it always goes beyond sharing my story. I prefer to share insights, the wisdom that I've learned along the way. So it's a topic that hugely resonates with me. And that's because at the age of 18, I had an experience where my dream was taken away from me. So it's at that point where most of these athletes can relate, is what is their identity beyond being a sports person? So we had some unbelievable conversations. I shared my story. They were absolutely phenomenal. Engagement was superb. I think the last 40 minutes of the session was just going one way, 2 ways. To top that off with having the opportunity on the same day to go to my old school was a morning that I'll never, ever forget.
You speak of, as an 18-year-old, having your dream taken away, right? I mean, you were a footballer, goalkeeper, and, I'm sure you had your sights set on a career in the sport. I mean, the sport we love so much. But cutting short that dream and looking at how you've overcome all these incredible challenges to where you are today, and the message that you're spreading, you're talking directly to adolescents, adults, right? But it's almost like that 18-year-old Danny is the voice inside of your head with that message. Is that fair to say? Am I maybe simplifying it too much, because there was a lot that came in this journey?
No, I think you got it spot on. I think that's what the key is. I think anything you experience in life, it's almost like, how do you go back to a time when you experienced it, and what would you wanted to have heard at that time, if that makes sense? So at 16 years old, when I had the dream of going overseas, and I had trials at 2 Premier League teams at the time, Blackburn Rovers and Newcastle United. Once they both told me I was too short as a goalkeeper, I allowed their voice to be louder than my voice. And at that age, I didn't have the tools to cope with it. I didn't have the resilience. So now when I chat to former athletes, when I work with former athletes, when I speak on stages. I pick moments from my story where I've experienced what they've experienced, bring in my story as a way of credibility, combine that with my own experience over the last 20 years. And that's how I blend it. And to be honest, that's what I've created. It's called the Unbreakable Process, because once I share my story, the number one question I always get asked is how? How are you still standing?
It's coming. Trust me, it's coming.
Yeah. So from that, I built a framework. So I had to go look at, okay, what actually have I done? Where any person, whatever adversity, loss, challenge that they face, if they do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5, they're able to overcome it and utilize it and transform their lives.
So how would you sum up what you do currently? I know there's studies happening at the moment. I know mental health is a huge focus. I mean, some of the stats in your videos that I've seen and stuff that Seth has shared with me blew my mind. As the father of a teenage son, it sort of scared the crap out of me in a way, because a lot of this stuff goes unnoticed because we live in a society where seeking help as a man is almost like taboo in a lot of cultures, not just in South Africa, but yet there are a lot of people that suffer in silence. And I think the key message that I've picked up is that it's okay to speak out and seek help. Is that part of the driving force where you are at the moment? And, you know, just to feed back, is it what makes you who you are on your mission 32?
Absolutely. So ask is step 3, where it's absolutely vital to ask for help. And when you do ask for help, you realize that the person sitting next to you, sitting opposite you, is going through the same thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's at the same moment, whether it's before, whether they're going to go through that in the future. And that's what creates that connection. So there were many times in my life where the normal response is to keep quiet, isolate, and I've had experience of doing all of that. And yeah, I wouldn't advise it as the most efficient way. But I think it's really important that people talk about it to anyone in whatever form that comes in. And yeah, when you have that conversation, the first benefit that you get, it just lifts the pressure off your shoulders. I think the ability just to hold space for someone is a huge skill set that anyone can develop, because once you listen and just give them the time to process, the time to speak, not interrupt them, they're able to extract those insights that are already within them, but that need space and room to flourish, to come to the surface. So that's a big part of the work that I do currently. In terms of what I do currently now, I've shifted careers quite a bit. Again, that's why I can relate to the former athletes. As a player, then I went to a coach, then I went to cork farming in Portugal, where in the last 6 months, it's like, okay, how do I bring that love that I had from being over a decade in professional football as a coach and numerous other roles? At the base of it, it's helping people. So it's now, how do I utilize what I've experienced to help people? And the best way that inspires me is getting on stages, sharing my story, sharing my experiences, and teaching people how to go through, how to transform what they've been through. So that's my mission at the moment.
So where do you start when you get onto the stage? Because I imagine it's a journey to get to that point where you are, and you mentioned the word credibility, you mentioned holding space. When you step onto the stage and you've got people waiting to hear what you say, right? What's the first step for you there? Because it's not an easy first step. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes engagement, it takes learning. But I imagine at the same time, that first step is not easy. So take us there. What is it like, especially when you now have the platform and the opportunity to tell your story to hundreds, if not thousands of people around the world?
Yeah, that's been... That question there is generally one of the most powerful questions I've been asked, because no one's asked me it yet. Because the last 6 months have been turbulent. So it was 6 months ago where I shared my story publicly for the first time, and the wave of emotions, the reaction that I got was at times too overwhelming. So I put a pause on it, where I stepped back and I'm like, okay, let me go do what I've been doing, whether it was as a football player or as a football coach. I've always been fascinated with learning from the best. So I always try to put myself in the best environments to learn from people. So I said, okay, if I want to become a speaker and all of this, how do I now go and package it in a way where it's of value to whatever audience that I speak to. Because if I just go and share my story all the time without even thinking about who's listening, it will go over people's heads and it won't be valuable to them. And I didn't want to create something like that. So I stepped back, and that coincides with step 5 of the unbreakable process, which is the transformation, where I've seen in the last 6 months how you go through the fears that you have, how you become very aware of the self-limited beliefs that you've had and been running for many years, and you start going through them. And to be honest, there's been opportunities I've had in the UK to go speak at certain occasions, speak to some of your Premier League teams, and I've said no, because I believed at the time that I wasn't ready, where now I look back and I'm like, okay, I can see clearly that it was just still that narrative playing in my head. So again, these type of conversations and this experience now allows me to get on a stage and not just speak, but to teach and engage with people and be an example that you can transform whatever you experience, and that it's actually there for you to grow and designed for you to become who you actually are.
We're going to dial it back to the steps just now. But you made an excellent point there. It's not just about speaking, because a lot of people can stand up and speak and fill a room with noise. It's about connecting and teaching, right? So let's look at your story now. I mean,
and sorry, and that's just one key point that I did with the retired athletes, is just linking what they've done in their careers.
Yeah.
That skill set is still there. So, for example, I looked at, okay, where have I been a good communicator? And it goes back to all the times as a little kid when I was a goalkeeper, staying at the back, watching, observing, communicating.
Yeah.
To be honest, even watching you, I remember the days of SuperSport Blitz. Like when you're around someone who's a great communicator, because you go quiet and you just listen to every single word that they take. So once I was able to bring all of those examples to my awareness, I'm like, okay, I've actually got it.
Yeah.
It's not missing. But that's what I was helping the guys at the Betway 12th Man program to learn, to see how the skill set that they've got and that drive that it took them to become these sports people in this country, to get to that top of that mountain. Those skill sets is still there, and now they have the capability to bring that skill set into Career 2.0.
Absolutely. They've got all the tools, right?
Yeah.
It's just about showing them how to use them again.
Exactly.
That's very simplified because you guys have done tremendous work there. But let's just dial it back. And how do you line up your story to the steps? Because not many people, I don't know if any people have the story. I mean, first losing your father early on in your life, and then the tragic things that have followed. It is stuff of movies, my man. It's almost hard to comprehend that someone can go through so much and come out on the other side. And if I think how you've had to forgive, and accept along the way, it could not have been easy. And I take my hat off to you, because I think you're an incredible human being. The fact that you can turn that loss, that tragedy, that pain into an opportunity to teach and inspire, and that's remarkable.
Thanks, yes. Yeah, you can see the tears in my eyes. That means a lot. I really, really appreciate it.
It blows my mind, to be honest. And I'm not trying to put this up in Hollywood lights or anything like that, but you lost your father. I mean, there was a fire. Do you still have like vivid memories, or do they haunt you? Or maybe just take me into the processing of it all.
Sure. So basically it comes down to, in my life, I've had 5 moments where my reality has been absolutely shattered. My world's been turned upside down and I was broken to pieces. And those are the 5 points that I touch on, whatever speaking engagements I do, workshops, or I still work quite heavily with athletes, entrepreneurs, anyone on a one-to-one basis. And it's a methodology I've been studying for the last 15 years that has helped me. But it's having those 5 moments allows me to bring a different perspective on things.
Okay.
And allows me to share how I've been able to go through it, because I'm more interested in the how. Because I had to go find out the how with myself. How actually have I done it, and build a process that allows me now, whilst I speak, whilst I work with people, to allow them whatever challenge that they're going through to be able to do that in their lives.
Yeah.
So like you said, age 4, the first moment that I experienced was losing my father to suicide. He was a renowned psychiatrist in South Africa, and I have absolutely no memories of him. The only memory I do have of that moment was I was the youngest sibling of 3 older brothers, and I was not allowed to go to the funeral. And I remember that really, really made me angry. I wasn't happy at all, but being the youngest sibling, my mom wanted to protect me. So I didn't go to his funeral, but chatting to a few family members about him, understanding his history, his background, I've been able to understand him. And that love for the mind, the love for human behavior, for helping people, a huge part of it comes from him.
It's inspired you, hasn't it?
100%.
You know,
100%.
even after he's passed. That's special, man. But tragedy has followed you, though. I mean, the next thing is also something that is incredibly tragic. And you were a lot older at that time. How did you deal with that?
So at that stage, I was 7 years old. It was the 13th of November, Friday, 1998. And my mom was a general practitioner, a doctor, and picked me and my brothers up from school like a normal day. Friday afternoon, you don't really want to cook dinner or anything.
That's a weekend.
Exactly.
So takeaways.
So stop at Sias in Morningside, get our burgers, rush home. And my mom tells us to go upstairs so we can get changed, showered, and ready for dinner. And we just so excited. We just want to have the weekend doing what we used to do back then, was riding bikes, swimming, football, being outside. You know, anyone who has a sibling can relate. And so I go upstairs, get changed, get showered, and come down the stairs. And that's the last thing I remember. And next thing I remember is waking up similar to exactly like this, to a light overlooking me, and to my left is a nurse. And as I'm opening my eyes, I'm hearing the noise beep, 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 beep. And as a 7-year-old, I look up and I see it's a nurse because of what she's wearing. And I ask her, I'm like, okay, where's Andre, where's Philip, and where's Michael, my 3 older brothers? And she responds, Philip's here. So she moved out the way so I could look to my left. And I looked, and that beep sound was the machines connected to my brother, keeping him alive. So I looked, and I hear the noise beep, beep, beep. So I looked back at the nurse and took a breath, took some time, and I'm like, okay, where's Andre and Michael? And her response was, they're in heaven. So at this point, I looked at the nurse, went completely quiet, and then gathered my thoughts and looked back in, and I said, okay, and my mom? And she says, no, your mom's in ICU. She's in a different part of the hospital, and she's fighting for her life. And I remember from looking at the nurse on my left, I just turned to the right and just looked down the alley, and my world completely shattered.
At 7?
At 7, the people closest to me were either fighting for their lives or they were in heaven. And I had no idea what had happened. And I had no idea anyone to talk to. So I went completely silent. I shut down.
I mean, processing that as a 7-year-old, firstly, it's impossible to comprehend. But when you realize what had happened, did it must have hit you hard?
So I don't remember the particular moment. It was a few days later where our principal from our primary school, Montrose Primary down the road, he was the one that sat my brother and I down and told us what had happened. But I'll come back to that now. But it was literally a year and 2 months following that where my mom was able to come and visit us. And the reason being because the person that he landed up telling us that when he sat down, Philip and I, and he said the person that was responsible for Michael and Andre being in heaven, myself and Philip being in hospital, and my mom fighting for her life was actually my mother.
Oh my goodness.
So the first time that I remember clearly hearing the story was actually my mom who sat us down. When she was allowed to come visit us in Portugal. And I'll never forget it, similar to where I'm seated now. She sat on the couch, I sat on the one arm, my brother sat on the other arm, and she explained to us when myself and my brothers went upstairs, she put tranquilizers and sleeping pills in our food. And as we came down, ate dinner, I don't know how much longer afterwards, we went to sleep, passed out. And at that time, she came around and injected us each with lethal injections. Following that, it was a beautiful house in Morningside. So that was one side of the house. She carried on down, came down the stairs, went to the other side of the house and was spraying petrol around the house. And she lit the house on fire. And at the same time gave herself a lethal injection. And fortunately, as you can imagine, with the flames and all of that, this was around 3:30 in the morning. Our neighbors heard the flames, saw the flames, smelt the flames, and called the emergency services. And it was actually a tow truck driver who was around the corner that heard the emergency come over the line. He arrived at the house, jumped the gate, and it was at that moment where 1/3 of the house was already burnt down. And my mom was still walking around on fire. That's why it took her an extra week to recover. And yeah, and then the firemen arrived, went upstairs to mine and my brother's rooms and took all of us out, and me and Philip managed to survive. So when I woke up in hospital, it was a Sunday afternoon. The incident took place on the Friday evening. So getting past the poison and the smoke inhalation was the two biggest struggles that we faced. So then, second question that I always get asked where I share this part of the story is, what was mine and my brother's reaction to our mother? And before I answer that, I think it's important to give a bit of context of what happened in those 3 years between losing my dad and this incident in 1998 November. So my mom divorced my father. He committed suicide. My mom lost her mother. My mom lost her brother. My mom got cancer. And as a result, she tried to give all of our finances to a broker in the hope that the broker would be able to generate income for my brothers and herself, because my mom had to stop working at the time. She at that stage had a practice in Wynberg, Alexander. And that's, again, where the love of helping people, community, again, comes hugely from her side. And unfortunately, the broker went and lost the money. So added financial pressure. And my mom's reasoning was, okay, I want out. I can't cope, but what am I going to do with my boys?
Who's going to look after the boys?
The whole family was still living in Portugal. She's like, okay, I don't want to put the burden on any of my friends. So she says her decision was, okay, if I'm going out, we're all going out. And to go back to the question, what was mine and my brother's reaction was, both of us chose to forgive her. After 2 years of her going through the legalities back in South Africa, she was found not guilty on the grounds of being mentally insane at the time. In her words, and I remember reading it on the newspaper front page, that she actually wrote a letter. But her words were, I could see what I was doing, but I was outside my body. I had no control of my actions. So once she was found not guilty, my brother and I were able to come back to live with her in South Africa. And that's where one key part of my messaging revolves around forgiveness. So that's why I do a lot of work with, whether it's conflict management or relationships, is once you have a deep understanding, it bypasses forgiveness. In modern society today, it's very, very easy to judge someone else.
Yeah.
But understanding takes a bit more work.
Yeah.
But with her, I knew who my mom was before the incident. I knew who my mom was after the incident. And I remember even just on Friday at the Betway workshop, a few of the athletes asked me what my reaction was, and they didn't understand it because they couldn't comprehend that my brother and I were both able to forgive her. But what was also important was that first step that my mom took when she sat me and my brother down and told us a story, because that's what anyone can go through and build in their redemption story. Is that first step is that accountability and that responsibility for your actions. So she didn't sugarcoat anything. She told us exactly how it was. And when I came back home, the question I got asked on Friday was, did I ever feel unsafe around my mom? And the honest answer is no. Weirdly enough, when I came back, I was in grade 4 and I used to go sleep at friends' houses. There were a few times I had to call my mom to come pick me up because I felt unsafe around not being around her and in the dark. So that's what's that one key message in is that forgiveness. And as you know, one of the hardest person to forgive in the world is yourself.
Absolutely.
So if I can forgive my mom for trying to take my life and Philip's life and taking Michael and Andre's life, the question I always ask is, who can you forgive in your life? Who can you understand? And just from that one experience, one of the greatest blessings I've got from it and that I've utilized in my coaching and that I utilize now in my speaking and work with people is looking beyond people's behaviors and words, what actually is going under the surface. And that's where all the magic lies is, and that's how you're able to change behaviors, mindset, build the resilience, is that shift of perspective, because there's no single event that you'll ever experience in life that's one-sided, that has only pain. That doesn't exist. So a big part of my work, which goes into the step 4, we'll go into the whole steps later on, but that's the mind shift where you change your perspective of the event. And then once you change your perspective, you dilute the emotional reaction to it, you get the insights and the lessons from each experience, and then you're able to incorporate them into your life, and you grow.
But it takes work, though.
100%.
There's no ways you can sit there and tell me straight away. It takes work to get to that point, right?
Oh, no, 100%. And I'm sure we'll get through it, but that's me as a 7-year-old.
I mean, incredible to think that you had to deal with, that as 7.
Yeah. So if you ask me what saved me at that time, it was football. Okay. So I moved to Portugal and I got introduced to football.
And why goalkeeper?
I don't know. I think it was me being the youngest sibling, Okay. So
you've got to stand between the
young
sticks,
one
right?
always gets thrown in goals. And then that competitiveness, with all the siblings, brothers, you don't want them to score and all of that. And I felt at home. I didn't have to run around, which was great. But anytime I stepped on a football field as a 7-year-old, I forgot about reality. And at that stage, we also got introduced to going to watch football games. So that's why football, sport, that's why, to be honest, a long time I wanted to become a football coach, because I wanted to use football and sports as a tool to have an impact on the world, where that originates from there, because that deep understanding, because I understand if I didn't have football at that time, there's a good chance I'm not sitting here today.
Well, you dressed like a smart football manager, I might just add. I mean, there's still time.
Yeah, exactly.
You could still manage who knows?
Yeah. Who knows where I'm open to anything.
I think the future is however you want to determine it, right?
No, exactly.
But you clearly have work to do now. You've almost found your calling. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I think that's what part of the human existence is about, is experiencing life.
Yeah.
And utilizing whatever you've experienced to share on for the next generation and be of service.
Yeah.
So that's the place that I'm in at the moment.
Danny, after that, you're in Portugal, right? Things don't get easier for you, though. Even though you found football and there's a love for football, tragedy strikes yet again a bit later on. And it must be difficult to say goodbye to someone who, if you think about her actions, was almost to try and save you from the future, if that makes any sense. How difficult was that process? Or was it something that kind of was an acceptance thing? I'm putting you on the spot here.
No. The reason...
But at the same time, I'm trying to understand, because I don't know how I would ever be able to react or cope with that.
No, the reason for my silence, I've never thought of the way you've just described it, that she was almost like trying to save me from the future. That's what made me go silent. So it was, the 4th incident was losing my mom. So in the space of moving back to South Africa, then we've mentioned number 3, which was getting my dream of becoming a professional footballer taken away. That's when I lost my identity, became depressed, and then that's the moment where the episodes of being a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old started catching up with me, because I didn't have football as my safe space. Yeah. So that's when I started acting out, numbing yourself, normal behaviors when you don't have the tools to cope with those painful moments. Yeah. So then from there, my heart wasn't in it to be a football player anymore. So I said, okay, let me go into the coaching. And And then again, step one where I always start is, okay, I want to learn from the best, be around the best. So I spent 5 years traveling up and down between South Africa and Scotland to get my UEFA badges.
Who inspired you there?
I was reading a Jose Mourinho book.
Okay. Special one.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember reading, he said that he went to Largs in Scotland to become educated. So I said, okay, I'm going to Scotland.
Yeah. Learned a lot from Sir Bobby Robson at Newcastle.
Exactly.
Barcelona.
Yeah.
I'm a Newcastle fan, as you probably can tell.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
So Mourinho actually, I quite like Mourinho.
Yeah. So he's the one that inspired me in the beginning to transition into coaching. And that took me on a 6-year journey in South Africa, where it started off at like coaching my high school team, King Edwards. Then I went to working at Forward Zone Sports Agency. Then I worked at one season at Stellenbosch FC. And then it was, okay, I want to go to London to, again, be around the best, challenge myself. And at that stage, my older brother, Philip, was already there. And it was 1 month into that journey where I hadn't officially moved across, because I was trying to find a job that side that as I was there, my brother and I got a phone call that my mom had collapsed at work. So immediately we flew back, and within the space of a week, we found out that she had cancer. So you asked me, when I look back at my childhood, especially like with my mom's redemption story, it was I had a phenomenal childhood. There were challenges with mine and my brother's relationship, 100%. We loved each other deeply, but for a good 10 years when we moved back, we just wouldn't speak. We didn't have that relationship. And yeah, I recall the one thing that I got to see at the same time with that 20-year journey with my mom was seeing the impact that holding on to guilt, shame, and grief has on a human being. So my mom shut off her life completely. The only thing that mattered in her life was me and my brother Philip. So again, that always fascinated me again to look deeper. Like, okay, why do people act like this? What's really going on underneath the surface? So at that stage, me and my brother get on the plane, come back to South Africa. And at that stage, my mom had transitioned into being a trauma doctor. So almost like a full circle moment where she literally spent the last few years of her life saving people's lives in the emergency room. And it was an 8-month journey that my brother and I were with her every single day, going through the cancer treatment, blood transfusions and all of that. And it was a very, very intense, stressful time. So when my mom passed away on the 8th of April, one of the greatest blessings I've had in my life and will ever have was witnessing my mom take her last breath at 3:30 in the morning, my brother and I right next to my mom.
Wow.
Yeah, and once you see a human being take their last breath, it has a profound impact on you. So,
I mean, sorry, I'm interrupting you there, but just elaborate on that profound moment, because is it something where you like, obviously you sad because you've lost a loved one, but you also feel at peace because they're in a better place and they're not suffering anymore? Am I on the right sort of page here?
Yeah. Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, in terms of you relief that they're not suffering anymore. But then you also learn the truth of life, that we're all going to die one day.
Yeah.
So it gives you a newfound appreciation for life, and especially when it's someone, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a close friend, or a partner, when it's someone as close to you as that, and you see them literally take their last breath and pass away, how would I describe it? It's one of the most beautiful moments I've ever seen. As painful as it was, it's at the same time, to be honest, made me just even appreciate breathing.
Yeah.
And that's a tool that I use in the most stressful situations when I walk into now. When you asked me earlier, how do I get on stage? It's just consciously breathing and having that appreciation to, once you're connected to your breath, you're like, okay, I'm alive.
Yeah.
I can handle this, and I can step forward. So yeah, it did have a huge impact on my brother and myself.
Did it draw you closer together after?
No, at that stage. So me and my brother started look, we would always communicate, but we'd never had a relationship like a brotherly relationship in terms of We would go out together, all of that. And that came down to, again, where that comparison, I was comparing our relationship to some of my closest friends with their older brother's relationship. And once you compare your relationship or judge someone, you can't connect with them on a deep level. And it was at 23 when I got introduced to the coaching methodology that I use and talk about now whenever I say, okay, blessings in any situation, is because I'm trained and I've used the method for the last decade on myself, which changes your perspective on events. And it was when I did it on my brother that I came to the realization that he couldn't be the brother because he was playing the father figure in my life.
True.
And as soon as I had that realization, our relationship shifted. And that was at age 23. And yeah, then our relationship shifted because I had that insight.
Yeah.
And I wasn't comparing him anymore. And I'd seen how he had been with me before was necessary and valuable to me. And more importantly, who was the brothers that I had outside of him. So yeah, at that stage, we both moved to London. And my brother went straight into his high stressful job, which was, he was a financial trader at a hedge fund, where I spent the next 6 months knocking on doors, trying to get into the football world, that side. And
not an easy place.
Not at all. I easily sent over 400 emails. I would go drop off the emails. And eventually I got an opportunity in Essex. So that was November of 2019, and I was traveling 6 hours a day. As you know, when you go after your dream, you're like willing to do whatever it takes. So that's how it started. And then, of course, 2020 came and COVID hit. So we were still able to go into work because elite football environment. So the first shutdown, no, but the second, third wave shutdown, whatever it was, we were able to go in. But at that stage, with COVID, I think anyone can relate. There was no way for people to escape what was actually going on in their lives. And I think that's why, like, if you look at adolescence now, all of that, and having all these conversations with schools, it's the teenagers are feeling the effects of that. And a lot of them have missed out on 2 full years of development.
Absolutely.
So my brother started struggling a bit at that stage. And then he took a 3-month break.
Were you aware that he was...
I was living with him.
Okay.
I was living with him. So I was 100% aware, and he had 3 episodes where his body started giving symptoms because he was in full flight or flight response when you get to the extreme. Anything I've seen with my family pattern is the extremes. So that allows me and has given me the drive to go study the opposite. So with him, again, he's seen the extremes of stress, of trauma, of grief, loss, how if you don't deal or process, that's been the biggest lesson I've learned. One of the biggest lessons I've learned from my family is that inability to process the traumatic moments, the challenges, the adversity, and you can't run away from that. It will catch up with you at some stage in your life. And so, he took a 3-month break, and then it was 14th of August, 2020, my birthday, and we had a dinner, myself, him, and his girlfriend, Babs. And at that stage, he had like 1 sip of wine and he was sweating. So after dinner, I immediately called the Uber, and I knew something was up. He was about to go back to work in 2 weeks' time. And I didn't sleep 1 second that night. And when his girlfriend and him woke up the next morning at around 9:30, I stopped Babs from leaving. I said, listen, can I chat to you guys in the living room? And sat them down, and it was at that point I said, Philip, listen, I'm going to try to do something that you did to me when I was 22. Because at that stage, like I mentioned earlier, I went to study, wasn't really playing football, and was lost. So he's the one that shook me and brought me back to reality. So I sat him down, and after this, like a 6-month journey, when we had been together, and I said, listen, Philip, I'm going to try to do something that you did for me. Can we please look at what's going on? 2 weeks' time, you're going to go back to work, be around that pressurized environment. Can we make a plan? That's how it started off. We landed up having a huge argument, and I left the apartment. And he messaged me afterwards saying, I'll see you tomorrow. At that stage, I was meant to fly that evening to go see some friends in Greece. And I didn't think anything of it. I responded. I said, listen, I love you. I'm here for you, whatever you need. And I immediately called his girlfriend. I said, listen, have you spoken to Philip? What's the story? And she's like, no, he's just going to a hotel. But he says he'll come past my place later. And I didn't think anything of it. Later in the afternoon, I messaged him saying, listen, I'll decide later if I'm going to Greece. I love you. No response. Didn't think anything of it. 4:30 in the morning, I wake up to go to the airport, decide not to go. So I messaged him saying, Philip, listen, I've decided not to go. No response. Around 9:30, his girlfriend Babs messaged me, have you heard anything? And I'm like, no. And my response to her was like, don't worry. I'm sure he's just sleeping it off. He'll be fine. Then like midday comes and now we start getting worried. She comes across to the apartment and we start calling the hotels in the area. And this was August. So you're probably looking at your second wave of shutdown in the UK. And some of the hotels didn't want to give information. Some of them said he wasn't there. And then it was like 5:30 in the afternoon where the buzzer rang at the apartment, and we were on the first floor, and it rang, and a huge relief came over me. I'm like, okay, he's back, he's here, you know. So I sprinted to the buzzer, and I picked it up. And as I picked it up, I said hello, and the response was, it's the police. Can we come talk to you? So I was like, okay. I remember putting the buzzer back down, looked to my left down the alley, and down at the end was Babs looking at me. So I remember I opened the door and I sprinted down the stairs. And as I was going down, the two police officers were walking up the stairs. And I remember I immediately said to them, what the fuck is going on? And they said, listen, can we chat to you inside? So I'm like, okay. And I remember turning around, walking up those steps, one step at a time, mind similar to what I've experienced those other 4 times, where it just goes into safe mode, shuts down everything. And I remember walked into the apartment, looked at Babs, walked towards her in the alleyway, walked past her. And as I turned around, the 2 police officers walked into the living room and they said, sorry to tell you, but we found your brother in the hotel room. He's taken his life.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was easily the hardest moment I've faced because he was the one person that could relate to me like not too many in the world could. So I was absolutely shattered. I fell back, screamed, cried for a good, I don't know how long, 20, 30 minutes, and had that initial response like we all do is, why me? What the fuck do I do now? Those were literally my words. So had to start making the phone calls.
Wow. And that even more difficult.
Yeah. Because then, you get everyone else's reactions and the energy's been drained. From your soul's depleted, right? Every message, every phone call. As I appreciate all of them, but it absolutely drained me because you have to explain everything. People want to know what's happened, what went on. And what did you tell them? Because for a lot of us, we still grapple with the concept of suicide and people taking their own life. And unfortunately, there's a shame that comes with it, right? Or a lot of people, they don't want to say that. Even to this day, there's a lot of people that out there who have had family members or friends that have taken their life and they're reluctant to use the S word. That's a question I've never been asked, and a absolutely crucial question because a death by suicide, and look, I can't relate it very much to my father because I was so young, but with my brother there's definitely a shame element to it. You don't want to talk about it, and then the other side of it, there's a huge guilt because the first place that your mind goes to is what ifs, why, trying to understand it. It feels personal. Yeah. So I struggled with it for the first 4 weeks easily, where I remember week 2 I just went through pure anger, where it was, okay, how could you leave me? You left me alone, type of thing, all of that. And I felt very, very angry towards him. But fortunately, at that stage already, I had knowledge of this coaching method, which allowed me to transform the gentleman that I work with, that I've been working with for the last 10, 15 years, to get me to be seated here. So I was able to process it because a lot of the other part of that methodology revolves around grief. So how do you process grief? How do you process loss? But that was, the toughest moments. So what did I do? I carried on with the football coaching. I was part-time before. 2 months later, November, there was an opportunity to become a full-time football coach in the academy in the UK. So I applied, managed to get there. And then I carried on for the next year and a half. But it was already 8 months later where I wanted to resign. But again, I asked people close to me, and again, I allowed their voice to be louder than my inner voice and my intuition that was telling me, like, you need change. And the reason was because, as I mentioned earlier, when I moved to the UK, football was my highest value.
Yeah.
I was willing to travel 6 hours a day to follow my dream.
Yeah.
But as soon as my brother passed away, football went down that list very quickly. So it wasn't the most important thing in my life anymore. So I started hating going to work, and then I started struggling. Even with all the work that I've done, I started really struggling because I started hating to go into work. So again, I understand people that go to work, hate their job, how that stress things, how it affects you functioning, the ability to think, problem solve, critical thinking. And those are the moments where it's really, really scary, because you start thinking that, am I the only one going through this? And again, that narrative, every time you think that, you're just imprinting that into your mind. And as you know, that narrative becomes your reality. So then I made the decision in February 2022.
I mean, that's just the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, hats off to you just being here and your courage, man.
So I said, I'm resigning from football. As you can imagine, everyone was completely shocked. But there was just a shift. Football wasn't the most important thing in my life. So I took a break, moved across to Portugal, and again, went into a whole new identity, career, and had a cork farm for my grandparents. So became a farmer for the last 2 years. And more importantly, allowed me to go study more in terms of this methodology that I use with clients and in workshops to understand it more and to be qualified to teach it, to coach it. And then at the same time, I tried other things like breath work and all of that to become, again, qualified in that. So when I made the decision in the last 6 months to share the story, that I was able to share it in a way that's valuable to people.
I want to ask you, and thank you for sharing this story. How do you keep that motivation going? Because I assume at times dealing with trauma, dealing with people who are going through stuff can be quite draining at times. But I assume that part of you also draws energy and inspiration to help others. There's that driving force. Is that right? Is that where your head's at in terms of this message? Because at the end of the day, it's a message. It is an international, you're an international speaker and you're coaching and that sort of thing. But it is a message at the end of the day that you're putting out in the world.
No, 100%. And it's been a process the last 6 months in terms of managing the energy. So like when I mentioned earlier that the first time I released the podcast, the reaction was, very strong. Again, receiving hundreds of messages from people, and I got overwhelmed. And it drained me. I had no energy. And I remember the first time I stepped onto stage, which was about 3 months ago, chatting to college students in Essex. And as soon as I left, I had no energy. I had nothing. Where now, after I've only spoken about 4 or 5 times, to be honest. But now, especially after Friday, where I did 2 in a row on Friday morning, when I left, that energy shifted, where it's not as drained anymore. Now it's turning into that inspirational thing. And I think that comes down to it's a skill set. Anything, it's just repetitions. So a big part of the drive in creating Mission 32 for me personally, beyond the service and sharing the story and inspiring, equipping and educating teenagers around the globe, is for me to get my repetitions in. I have an opportunity now to at least get 95 repetitions in 3 different countries to different audiences, boys, girls, private schools, public schools, underprivileged kids, absolutely huge variety. So that's what I'm gaining from the experience, is those repetitions, so that I can learn what parts of the story do I share, And of course, the more you do it, the more you learn to say things in a different way or different insights, what worked here, what worked didn't there.
Reading the room is also one thing that you learn over time. Mission 32, what are you hoping to achieve when you've done the 32 schools? I mean, because it's a fantastic concept. And maybe just before you answer my question, just haunt us with those stats, because I don't think enough people know about those stats and how many people, teenagers, battle with mental health issues.
Yeah, it's when I read them, it's scary. It's what 50% of mental illnesses begin at the age of 14.
That's formative years. You know what I mean? That's wow. Please carry on.
So just reading that one stat was enough for me to do something about it. You know what it was, to be honest, Sias, was the last 2 times I've come back to South Africa, being around friends and family here, is I always hear about students that have taken their lives in schools. And whenever I hear someone take their life, whatever age, I always get goosebumps. And it was, to be honest, a few weeks ago where I heard another student took his life. I won't mention schools or anything like that out of respect, but it was a school very close to me. And to be honest, that inspired me and gave me the nudge that it was time to step into the ring and do something about it. So I created Mission 32 5 weeks ago, where 32 comes from my brother was 32 when he took his life. So the aim is to get to 32 schools in the countries that resonate or have something to do with my journey.
Yeah.
And through that and through raising funds for Mission 32, the aim is I'd love to go to more countries. But it's at the moment the aim is to get to 20,000 adolescents, so that high school kids from 13 to 20, so that if some of them have experienced or are experiencing or will experience adversity, which is a completely normal thing about life, that they at least have some tool or education that they can already have that starting block to begin their own journeys. And that again comes down to those stats. 1 in 7 adolescents around the world have a mental disorder. It's add on top of that COVID, add on top of that your unique pressures that they face now. So that's why I utilize Mission 32 to try utilize my experience, my story, what I've learned, to give them tools to equip them for life, so that we're able to dilute the impact of mental health in adults.
Where can people get hold of you if they want you? Have you already got the schools in mind, or are you identifying certain schools? How is it all taking place? Can schools still reach out to you? Maybe there's more than 32 schools that want to hear your story and be inspired.
No, absolutely. Any school, any part of the country, please do reach out. It's been a process to try to get to the schools. It's a bit tricky now at the moment with exams, but it's just been the contacts that I have, and just doing one school at a time, posting it, people see it. But no, there's definitely still room. So any schools, any teachers, anyone involved in schools, any help that you can get in connecting me to the schools to share my message, I'd really, really appreciate.
Can they pop onto your website, danielcostagil.com? Is that the easiest
best
way
ways
to reach you?
Through email. The website, danielcostagil.com. Email address is daniel@danielcostagil.com. LinkedIn, Instagram. Please, do reach out. Any help that we can get, the more people that we can get involved, the more money that we can get allows me to take this beyond those 3 countries.
We've got a few minutes left, Daniel. What is your, and this is unfair because I could talk to you for another hour at least, but Ray, my executive producer, is going to start shouting. What's your takeaway? What do you want people to take away from your story? Like if you could leave them with something, because we all go through various levels, as you say, of adversity in our lives. And I think as South Africans, we deal with a higher sort of stress level without even knowing it. And it's almost a survival instinct that makes us incredibly resilient. Yet it's okay to speak to people and ask for help What is your key takeaway to these 32 schools and more that I've no doubt you will reach? You'll impact lives and you will change lives.
Yeah, just before I answer that question, the one point of South Africa, how we live in stress and survival mode, I only realized when I moved to London that you feel straight away your body relax because you're not always on alert. So that's true. And so we have a traumatic history in South Africa. So again, environment, whatever environment you're in, you become the environment. So that's absolutely true. But that's why I'm really grateful that I'm beginning Mission 32 back home. And that's where I'm beginning to, on this journey of trying to impact people's lives and teach them that how to take whatever you experience and transform it and utilize it. Because one thing I'm absolutely certain of with everything that I've experienced, there's absolutely nothing I would change. I'm grateful for everything that's happened to me, but to get to that state takes work, and that's what I want to teach, is showing people how to look at things differently, because all it comes down to is your perspective on events. So anything might happen in your life, let's say, for example, this glass of water, but what I see from this side to what you see from that side is completely different, but both sides exist. But if I only see this side and don't want to look at that side, I'm missing half of the equation. I'm missing half of the glass.
Yeah.
And then once you see the whole glass, you're able to have a sip of water and enjoy it. And that's what events are designed to have, because they all got lessons in it. And as human beings, we're just designed to grow, elevate our level of consciousness. So that's why I'm really, really driven now, is to utilize my story as an example that, first of all, you can get over life's toughest moments. And then how can you utilize those moments to help you thrive and not live in survival?
Danny Costa Gil, thank you so much for your time. Check out his website. Get in touch. If you're schools, doesn't matter who you are, reach out to him, danielcostagil.com. Check out the website. Get in touch. Daniel, thank you for your courage. Thank you for being a beacon of hope. Thank you for overcoming what can only be described as a tragic story and coming out on top and telling your story. Keep up the amazing work, and thank you for sharing it on the show.
And for me, thank you for taking me to places I've never been and for asking questions that I've never had. And there were moments where, you took me really deep and you opened up my heart, and for that, I'll always appreciate it. Thank you,
you're
Sias.
always welcome here. Anytime, next time you're in the country, you want to find out how Mission 32 is going. Hopefully it's 64. Who knows? I'd love to see that grow and flourish. So thank you for your time. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching the Sias du Plessis show. Like and subscribe. And thank you to our partners at Betway. Check out betway.co.za for more information. We'll catch you again next time.